Good afternoon, and welcome to our Fall 2009 TCPW Closing Luncheon. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Paul Rozin. Dr. Rozin is a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He just informed me that he has been at Penn for 46 years and has never had another full-time appointment. So truly, Dr. Rozin is a very, very special faculty member to have with us today. Dr. Rozin chaired the psychology department at various times and directed the university-wide undergraduate honors program, and has been involved in developing policies and teaching materials to guarantee a minimal competence in quantitative skills and critical thinking in University of Pennsylvania undergraduates. He was also a founding director of the Solomon Asch Center for the Study of Ethno-Political Conflict, and a recipient of the American Psychological Association Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award in 2007. Over the last 25 years, the major focus of Dr. Rozin's research has been human food choice, considered from biological, psychological, and anthropological perspectives. During this period, Dr. Rozin studied the psychological significance of flavorings placed on foods in different cuisines, the cultural evolution of cuisine, the development of food aversions, which we were just talking about, the development of food preferences, family influence in preference development, and body image. These are extraordinarily fascinating topics, and in fact, I informed Dr. Rozin that somehow there's been a sub-theme because they've been rearing their head at every one of our meetings this conference, so this was certainly meant to be. Dr. Rozin attended the University of Chicago, receiving an AB in 1956, and received a PhD in both biology and psychology from Harvard in 1961. His thesis was sponsored by Jean Mayer. He spent 2 subsequent years working with Jean Mayer as an NIH postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard School of Public Health. We are honored that Dr. Rozin has been with us at the University of Pennsylvania since that time as both a distinguished professor and renowned expert in his field. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Paul Rozin.
This may be the highest percentage female audience I have ever addressed, though I have addressed the American Dietetic Association, but there were 3 men in the audience there. I found them out of 200 and something. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to try to do 2 different things. Just talk to you a little about what a general topic that I thought was of interest, which is how to deal with the changing world around us, what psychology has to say, and then I will talk about food in particular. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about at first is partly work that comes out of positive psychology, a new branch of psychology, which was founded by Martin Seligman here at Penn. We have the only full-size positive psychology center in the world here. And the idea of positive psychology is psychology pays a lot of time worrying about the 5% of people who really have really important and serious mental problems, but there's the 95% of the rest of the people who are not necessarily living optimal lives, even if they're not clinically diagnosable. So the attention has been to improving the quality of life. So let me just say a few things. First of all, I'm going to be talking today about the developed world. That's only 15% of the people in the world. That's Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, Japanese, Singaporeans maybe. It's a minority of the world. So it's reasonable to be concerned about our humans on Earth. I am personally concerned. That's why I work in ethnic conflict. But this is a talk directed more at the world that we all live in, okay? And our world has changed particularly drastically in the last 20 years. The internet is the major change. not computers, I think it's the internet. We now communicate largely by email with people, Facebook. When I grew up, when some of you grew up, when we were dealing with a person, we were looking at them, and we were talking to them, and we could, sort of feel them. Shopping has become something we do online. It's very hard to talk to anybody commercial on the telephone. You just talk to a voice, right? We've all learned little tricks to try to get to speak to a person, and you'll be told that your call is extremely important to them, and then they'll make you wait 5 minutes, right? The young folks don't know this because they think that when you pick up a phone, of course nobody's going to answer. We get an infinite choice set now. You want to buy anything, a car, a CD player. You are faced with a dazzling array of choices. In the old days, there were a few, and you'd go to your local store and you'd say, Johnny, which one should I buy? And he'd say, buy this one. You'd say, great. Almost everything is automated, and we live in a world of images that we never lived in before, where most of your travel comes from watching videos about different parts of the world, not actually going there. So this is a big change. We weren't built for this world. We still have desires, like we used to for food and other things. We still have families, and we still die. Why don't they fix that one while they're at it? But they haven't yet. So I just want to say a few things in general. First of all, we are primates, and we evolved over hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. And we evolved to be successful in our ancestral environment, which was a savanna, an environment of grasses and occasional trees. That is not the environment we live in. So many of our biological adaptations serve us ill in this world. I'm going to talk about that particularly with food. Face-to-face interactions were all that we had in the environment we grew up in. We used to have to forage for each piece of food we wanted. And of course, we had a very small social circle, whereas now you can be in communication with everyone in the world, either by direct email or by listening to the news. So this has changed our world totally. I just want to mention two fundamental psychological processes which affect the way we deal with this. One is called framing. It's how we put a context around something. So we ask people, how satisfied are you with your life? 1, not at all. 9, extremely. People give us a number. First of all, only Americans happily give us a number. Most people say, what? A number from a satisfaction? Americans are used to giving numbers for everything. Okay, but a reasonable question which one participant asked was, compared to what? And then that's exactly the issue. Compared to what? So life satisfaction surprisingly goes up only modestly with income, relatively little. It does not go down with age. Old people in this country have a satisfaction of life which is comparable and sometimes higher than people in middle age. And culture differences are surprisingly small given the enormous economic differences in just getting through life, say, between India and the United States. So on a 10-point scale of 1 to 10, Indian quality of life as rated by Indians is only 1 point lower than American, even though they're worrying about where am I going to get food for tomorrow, and we're worrying about whether we should get a third car. Okay? All right. So this is that data that I was just telling you about. Per capita income in India, $450 per year. United States, $30,600. Quality of life difference on a 1 to 10 scale, 6.21 for the average Indian, 7.71 for the average American. There is a difference there. But if you look at the massive difference in material welfare and health and life expectancy, it's surprisingly small. Just a quick mention, I'm skipping through some stuff. We recently did a study on Holocaust survivors. Lena Cherfis was a Penn undergraduate. This was her honors thesis. And one of the things we found that has to do with framing is that some Holocaust, these are all Jewish Holocaust survivors living in the United States, some of them are anti-German. They can't stand anything German. They wouldn't go near a Volkswagen. They can't stand hearing German music. They would never go into a German restaurant. They'd be unhappy if a German American was living in their apartment house. Others, on the other hand, we found, have no problem with any of these things. They are just anti-Nazi. They can go, they have no trouble visiting Germany. They listen to German language things. So we found that this remarkable difference in Holocaust survivors, some of them have this big, massive negativity on the basis of this horrible experience they had, and others have focused it on the people who actually did it to them, which is to say the Nazis. We don't know why that's true, but that's an example of framing. Who do you hold responsible? A whole people or a group of a subgroup of those people who were directly involved? I'm going to skip this as to how we got that. Just let me give you one other interesting example of this. Let's take a case that you're all familiar with of a reasonably, what seemed like a reasonably successful marriage, in which at the end of the, at some point late in the marriage, let us say the wife discovers that the husband has been having an affair for 20 years. Okay, now, so let's suppose the marriage breaks up. Now the question is this: what does the wife do with her memories for her husband in the days in which she thought he was a good guy and they had a wonderful time together? They went to Italy, they did all this. Now she thinks he's a stinker. Now the question is, does she rework the memories of those old days and think, oh my God, it was so terrible, we had all this fun in Italy and he was going with another woman? Or does she say, look, I had a great time in Italy with a guy, I didn't know it, and now I think he's a stinker? Now, you see there's a big difference. This is like the Holocaust case. You can frame your life differently. You can imagine that it's healthier in general for the way you think about yourself to preserve those good days you had with him. And say, look, it was wonderful then, and I felt wonderful, and I can still recover that, even though I know. So the point is that people have different ways and different options of framing their life. The second thing I want to mention, the big psychological principle, is adaptation. People adapt to things, particularly negative things, but also much more than they realize they do. And the famous study on this is Philip Brickman's study, in which he studied people in Michigan who had either a year ago become paraplegic in a car accident, usually, or had won a very large lottery. Okay, so people had a wonderful positive event. 1 year later, they were only as far apart in how happy they were with their life as the Indians and Americans were before. That is, the people who got all the lottery money got used to being rich, and it didn't give them much pleasure anymore. And the paraplegic learned to live with paraplegia and basically thought they were doing pretty well. Which is to say, people greatly overestimate the effect of major positive or negative changes. You all know people who have serious handicaps, and you're probably surprised at how well they're doing and how happy they are. They weren't that happy when it happens, but after a while you get used to these things. And aging is one of those things. Older people are much happier than younger people think they ought to be. And the reason for that is that older people are used to being old. You don't suddenly wake up one morning and you're old, and you've been old for a while and you get used to it. You get used to the fact you're not going to remember everything and this and that. And young people think of themselves as being old like that, and of course that's not good. You know, you lose a lot of things. But in fact, old people score quite high in this country and other countries in the satisfaction with their lives. So the point of this is adaptation is powerful. Anyone who has to go through a surgical procedure has to deal with this. They're going to think, I'm going to lose my arm or something. Oh, it's going to be terrible. It isn't good to lose your arm, but a year later, they'll be just about where they were before. Okay? So that's one of the nice stories about aging. Now, mortality is, of course, the big one. And endings are extremely important in making judgments. Let's take a baseball game. Almost all that matters to a baseball fan is who won the game. They could have been miserable during the game, right? Their team was behind. It comes back in the ninth inning. They won 2-1, and they say, it was a great game. It was a terrible game. They actually was suffering through the whole thing. So endings really matter. And let me just say, one thing that our culture exaggerates to make it worse is we don't treat old people very well in our culture. If that's my crude measure of how much attention and respect we give to people as a function of age. We like kids, but we don't think they're really, we think of them as sub-people, but cute. And of course, old people we put away in places like, life care communities if they're lucky. If you look at Japan, you see something very different. The kings in Japan are the wise old people and the little kids who rule the roost. So there's a different structure in the society. In most traditional cultures, there's great respect for old people. In this culture, there is more, my God, what am I going to do with my parents when they, and the reason is, of course, that we don't live with our old folks. In traditional America and in most of the world, old folks live with their children and grandchildren. They help to take care of their grandchildren. We have separated them off as a separate wing of society, and that is not good for old people. It's not good for them to be with only old people and to not see their grandchildren except once every month or so. So this is a feature of our society that makes aging more difficult. I'm going to skip on now to that and just say one thing too, because I think you'll be very interested in this. I'm on a small committee that is working on getting a life care community at Penn, and on the Penn campus. This would be open to anyone who had any association with Penn. The virtue of this, I'm hoping we'll have one in 5 years. The virtue of this is for Penn. Everyone profits from this. Penn keeps their faculty around, particularly the faculty around, so they can keep teaching and interacting with students. Penn's trying to get their faculty like me to retire. One way to help them is to say, well, you can stay on campus and have all the university advantages. Of course, for the people who join this community, it's a great advantage. They're in a vibrant academic, intellectual environment. They're a walk from Center City. They're a walk from the train station. They have lots of young people walking around. There'll be classrooms in this. They have the HUP right there. They don't have to have their own medical facility. They have all the sports facilities around. So, and it, by the way, won't cost Penn basically anything, because we'd like them to give us the land. So far, they haven't offered it. The university life cares exist in over 10 universities. They are self-sustaining. So, this is just something I want to mention. This is some particular effort to improve the quality of life of a lot of people, including those affiliated with Penn. What? I would say there's about 10. UCLA is building it now. University of Florida has one. University of Washington has one. Sometimes they're a little off campus. We're fighting hard to get it on campus, not near campus. That's been an issue. Okay. So what I want to talk about now is food, which I know you're all interested in, and I want to put it in the framework of the following. The idea is that we can learn. Every culture has its ways of doing things. I think we do something wrong about food in our culture. We can learn from other cultures. What you can do is look at a culture and see what do they do well, and say, how do they do that well? Every culture doesn't do everything well. I would say France does food well. I don't mean just that they make good food. They make food much more positive than we do. They don't do a bureaucracy well. They don't do universities well. We don't want to borrow from them there. If I wanted to get an organized train system, I would go to Germany, not to France. But I'm going to say to you in general today that in the area of food, one that you all care about, we have a lot to learn from the French about how to make food a positive part of our life. So let's start with the American woman. In my view, the average American woman is eating disordered. I don't mean that in a clinical sense. I mean that the average American woman is spending a lot of time worrying about her weight, what she looks like, whether her diet is appropriate, very frequently dieting, almost always failing in her diet, feeling therefore unfulfilled, feeling ugly. And what was, a long time ago, even in this country, 50 years ago, one of the great pleasures of life, eating good food and enjoying it with your friends, has become an ambivalent experience. Now, this is not healthy. It's not healthy because, first of all, if you said, for example, I don't like my height, you could say, okay, I don't like my height, but let's get on to something else. Well, your weight is sort of like your height. That is to say, it's very hard to change. It's easier to change than your height, but not very easy. It looks like it's easy, and it's not. So worrying about your weight, you should think about it like worrying about your height. You just accept your height. It's just the way you are. Okay. This is a study we do on, we ask people to rate their own appearance. Just look at the women there. not the men. We ask them to rate their own appearance. They can use any number, like 27, 16, whatever you think you are. And what is your ideal figure? Now, I have data from the parents of Penn students. So people like you, and I unfortunately couldn't find the slide in the last one. So this is data from Penn students. Just look at the top line there. This is what Penn students say they look like, females. This is what they would like to look like. They're almost all thinking they're overweight. Okay? This, by the way, is what Penn men think would be an ideal woman. Notice it's quite a bit heavier than what Penn thinks. We've got this data on the parents of the Penn children. It looks exactly the same. The mothers think they're overweight, and their husbands think they want them heavier than the mothers think the husband. Well, it's not that the husband. The problem is that the mothers are not trying to be the right weight for their husbands. They're trying to be the right weight for their friends, their female friends.
But do the mothers think their daughters or sons here are equally overweight?
We didn't ask the mothers about their children in this particular study. It's a good thing to do. By the way, the fathers, the Penn men think they're just where they want to be there. There's no issue. Look at them. Look, here's what they are and here's what they like to be. No problem. Now, the interesting thing is that the Penn fathers think they're overweight, and they know it, and they rate themselves as heavy, but they don't care. They don't diet. They just say, look, I'm overweight. You know, that's what happens in middle life. You can't win them all. Okay. That's not where men are much more interested in their fillies than their waistline. Okay. Just to give you, this is data from 6 colleges around the United States. It includes University of California, Santa Barbara. It includes Arizona State, Wisconsin. This is done with 2 Penn undergraduates, Rebecca Bauer, Dana Cananisa. I am concerned about overweight, and people were asked that, and it said the answers were never, okay, rarely, sometimes, often, or almost always. 57% of the females said often or almost always. 57, and this is a good sample of American college undergraduates, not a Penn sample. By the way, the Penn sample is not very different from Wisconsin on this. Here's one. I am embarrassed to buy a chocolate bar in the store. 13.5% of the women say they're embarrassed to buy a chocolate bar in the store. To be seen purchasing something of high caloric value. One of the great foods of the world, right? When you think of chocolate, you should say, yum. You shouldn't say, oh my God, and think about your weight. All right. Now, we are a generalist animal. Let me just say, I want to say this quickly, but we are a generalist. We eat everything. And we have relatively few built-in biases, but one is that we have certain tastes that we like from birth. And those tastes include sweet and almost certainly, though it's never been really shown well, fatty textures, both of which predict calories. We used to need calories when we were out there in the savannah. And this was a clue to something having calories. These are pictures of newborn infants. And this, in column 3, a drop of sugar water is placed on the child. You see the face there, very positive. Here's a drop of quinine water placed on the child, a very negative face. These are kids who've never eaten anything yet. Okay? All right. Another feature that we have that is used to be a good one is what we'll call short-sightedness. It used to be that what you should worry about is what's up now. Is this good for me? I'll do it. But now, when we've gotten rid of infectious diseases and all that, our health issues have to do with you do this now and you keep doing it, and in 30 years, you're going to get something earlier. Now, we were never built to to do that. We evolved in a world where if it was food, eat it. Because, you don't always get food, and there it is. And so our short-sightedness, of course, is not just about food. It's about climate. It's about everything. It's very adaptive in a world in which you're not sure you're going to be alive tomorrow to do what you have to do to stay alive. Okay. So we have a bias toward eating. If there's food, eating. We are also evolved, and so are all animals, and I mean all. This is done on hundreds of species. We are evolved to spend as little energy as possible to get as much food as possible. Because that makes sense in nature, right? If you spend a lot of calories getting food, then you get less net calories. Since calories used to be good, the idea is be efficient. So we have now, of course, created a world which no one ever imagined, and it never was occurred before in evolution, where you don't have to do anything to get food. But ordinarily, it was tied to effort. We have, just to give you another idea of something that we're equipped with, which makes sense in our old environment, it's called the law of similarity. It says the image equals the object. This is part of animals, not just humans. If it looks like a tiger, it's a tiger, right? That makes sense, right? In the world we evolved. If you saw something that looked like a tiger, you should hide, run, or do whatever you do to help yourself, right? If you saw something that looked like food, you should go get it. But you don't see tigers. You see pictures of tigers. You live in a world of images now. There's no reason to be afraid of a picture of a tiger. But you have in your head a system which says, looks like a tiger is a tiger. So when we present Penn undergraduates, which we generally call the highest form of life, this is a piece of chocolate fudge that people know it's chocolate, shaped to look like a dog poop. Okay? And if the people who do this know it's chocolate fudge. The majority of Penn undergraduates who love chocolate will not take a bite of that. Now they say, I know this is stupid. They say this, but there's a piece of them saying, looks like dog do, is dog do. And it's in there. Okay, it doesn't make sense in a world of images to go around doing that. Okay, all right. I will skip. Just the monotonic mind, I'm going to skip some things to save time. The monotonic mind refers to the fact that most people believe that if something is bad for you in large doses, then it's bad for you in any dose. Now, that might be true for viruses, but it's not true for food, right? A little salt, without a little salt, you're dead. With too much salt, you may have a problem. Without cholesterol, you're dead. Well, you don't have to eat it, but I mean, your body's loaded with cholesterol. You'd be dead your body is filled with cholesterol in membranes, and you couldn't live without it. All right, so I just have an illustration of that. We also have a dichotomous mind. In the complicated world we've created, it's very hard to make complicated decisions. So it's a tendency to say there's good and bad food, which of course is not true. Chocolate falls on the bad side for most women, and it's too bad because A, it's not bad, and secondly, it isn't even bad for you. Chocolate is a lot of calories, but it's actually not an unhealthy food. Think about it. The fat in chocolate is vegetable fat, if you're worried about animal fat. And I'm going to tell you shouldn't be worried. Okay. Similarly, this categorical thinking says if you have a body mass index over 30, you're obese. People think, 29.9, I'm okay. I'm okay, right? There is virtually no evidence of any real significance that being overweight is risky for health. Being obese is. But what we call the obesity mafia, they're an interesting group. They are trying to get everyone to be worried about obesity. It is something to worry about. But they want you more. It's like the AARP, right? They keep dropping their age of entry so they can get more people in there. Well, they want the overweight in there too to worry. But the overweight are really not at risk. But they'll probably drop it to 24 one of these days so they can get more people who are at risk. And we take it very seriously. We take these arbitrary boundaries very seriously. We shouldn't. Okay. Just to give you an idea of framing in this world, it turns out that 5% fat, people think that 5% fat food is more unhealthy than 95% fat-free food. Now, not if you ask them that way, but if you put 5% fat on one label and 95, this is a framing issue. What are you focusing on? The presence of fat or the absence of fat? So, the death in the political domain, the Republicans have the brilliant idea of changing the estate tax to the death tax. No one thinks people should be taxed for dying, but most people think if you have a lot of money, it's okay to be taxed. And they change the whole discourse by just changing the name. Okay, granola bars, even if they're coated with chocolate, are sold in the cereal section, not in the candy section. So when you're feeling virtuous choosing in the cereal section, well, I'll get one of these guys, right? These are all little things that affect us. Now, there are two major changes that have occurred in our world that have produced these effects. One is agriculture domestication some 8,000 years ago, and that changed our food world because that, of course, allowed people to specialize in growing food and feed other people and so on. And the other one is the late 20th century developed, that's supposed to say world. And that is when the modern food world arrived with functional foods, with the fact that your local grocery supermarket has more food in it, more different kinds of food than anyone in the world had access to 25 years ago. You can get cilantro, tortillas, whatever you want in your local supermarket. Nobody, kings couldn't get that stuff 50 years ago. They didn't know what it was. And the further problem is that we have used food. We have used food. It used to be food was nutrition, but now it's everything. It's a social marker. It's chocolate at Valentine's Day. This is not recent. This has occurred through evolution over a few thousand years, cultural evolution. It's become an art form. You don't have to spend more than $10 a day to eat if you just want good nutrition. I mean, the rest of it is pleasure. It's aesthetic. It's used as a metaphor all of the time when we say, for example, I can't swallow your argument, or let's get to the meat of the argument, or that's a bitter person. These are all food words. And it's become a moral entity. Cigarettes are obviously something that have entered the moral domain. Smokers are thought to be, and this has been shown in psychology, not nice people. Not nice people. And there is evidence that overweight people are thought to be not as nice. No evidence that this is true, but this sort of the generalization of one, quote, negative property to another. Those of you interested in this, this is the great book on this subject about how food has become so much more than nutrition. And I was going to, this is a quote of Cass, we eat as if we don't have to. We exploit an animal necessity as a ballerina exploits gravity. That is, our eating is a celebration of culture. Fork and knife. I mean, no other animal does anything like this. Fork and knife, cutting the food, and we talk while we're eating. Nobody can see what's inside your mouth, right? Because that's ugly, the food in there. We manage to eat, talking, looking at another person, and putting food in our mouth and talking through that hole without showing the food in our mouth. This is a great accomplishment. Any animal would say it's magic. It's magic. It's part of being civilized. So food is, now I was going to show you this great movie, which I don't have time for, but I'll recommend it to you. It's Phantom of Liberty. It's a French film, and in this film, I'll just tell you very quickly, it takes 7 minutes. It's a fancy French dinner party. People come in, they sit down at the table, and all the seats are toilets. And everybody pulls their pants down, sits on the toilet, and they have a normal discussion like we have for food. It's just a wonderful scene. And then one of them gets up, pulls up his pants, and goes to the little room where he eats dinner in a closed door room. And somebody knocks on the door, and he says, sorry, occupied. Okay, no culture has done that. No culture, every culture has elaborated eating. No culture has elaborated socially going to the bathroom. And no culture has elaborated anything like eating. I mean, sex is more elaborated, but nothing like eating. Eating is, no chimpanzee would recognize what we're doing now as eating. I mean, you got all that food in front of you, you're not eating it. Okay. So, in the late 20th century world, we've come to start worrying about long-term effects of food. We have a food surplus, something we never had before, we as developed countries. We have an extraordinary range of food choices, never available to humans. We've developed superfoods. Chocolate being an example. Chocolate doesn't grow on trees. There's nothing that good that you can pick up just walking through the woods. Okay? And we've arranged it so you don't have to work to attain anything. And we are given, to make us worry about all this risk information. Every day in the New York Times, there's something else that can kill you, right? And at the same time, we're not even taught how to deal with that information. We don't teach in American education, high school or college, how to think about risks and benefits. We don't teach nutrition either. It's astonishing. We teach we teach high school kids how to factor polynomials. How many times have you factored a polynomial since you got out of high school? We don't teach them basic probability, which is really important. 70% of Penn undergraduates in my Psych 1 class can't tell me what's the chance of getting 2 heads out of 3 flipping a coin. It's not their fault. They didn't learn it. But that's important because that allows you to look, that's the basis for evaluating risks and benefits. And they can all factor polynomials. Well, so there's something wrong. Our education system has not, I teach this, by the way, in Psych 1. I teach critical thinking in Psych 1 because I think it's so critical because we get all this psychological information about mental illness and all kinds of other things. You know, every day I find something to tell my class about in the newspaper, which is misrepresented somehow in the media. Okay, so The Omnivore's Dilemma is the other book I will recommend. Many of you may have read it. It's a wonderful book about how food's placed in the modern American world. And Michael Pollan, you know, it was the book that everyone read Every freshman read it 2 years ago. It was the Penn reading, and I was involved in that, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, now, we're going to now turn to the problem. The obesity epidemic is not an epidemic. It has none of the properties of an epidemic. It isn't contagious, for one thing. But in addition, if you actually look at the data, the average American has gained 1.4 pounds a year in the last 20 years. That's 30 pounds. That's a lot of pounds. But notice it's not much a year. Just to give you an idea, if you ate one less apple a day, everything else held constant, and ate one less apple a day, you would lose 8 pounds in a year. So the obesity epidemic is fixing your intake by 3 apples or 2 apples a week. If you shifted 1 Coke every other day to a Diet Coke and everything else stayed the same, you would have no obesity. So people who want to restructure society, tax foods, it's really a matter of getting people to eat a little bit less, but keep doing it, not to go on a diet. We'll talk about that at the very end. Okay, France, to me, has a better solution to this problem. This is work I've done with Claude Fischler, a French sociologist. Just for 61% of Americans were overweight. This is 1990, it's higher now. 1998, 39% of French, so they're thinner. Everybody who goes to Europe notices that Europeans are thinner, and every European who comes there says, my God, how heavy Americans are. Okay. Interestingly, if you look at life expectancy, we're below France. Only by a little, not worth worrying about, but it's not like they're paying a big price. The French eat more fat than we do, and they eat more animal fat than we do, and they weigh less, and they're in the cardiovascular system, they're healthier. This is some data, this is called the French paradox. You may know about that the French eat more fat than we do, animal fat, but they have lower heart disease. You'll see that this is one set of data, roughly 1/3 less heart disease in France. Now, of course, they have to die of something. So, but since we're worried so much about heart disease, that should be sobering. Okay, let's talk about thinking about food. We asked people in France and the United States, what would you prefer? A week at a hotel with great food and average accommodations, or a week for the same price at a hotel with average food but great accommodations? Okay, let's just look at the women. Only 13% of the French women prefer the hotel, the luxury hotel. 83% of the American women. Now, there's 2 reasons for that. One is that we are the luxury culture. We like those fancy mattresses and all of that, and you can be able to control the lights from your bed and all of that. But the other reason is that the women are afraid about being locked up in a hotel for a week that has good food, because they think they're going to gain weight. The French women are not so worried about that. And they're not going to gain weight, by the way, it turns out. Okay, we asked people, well, how do you think about food? When you think of heavy cream, does that make you think of whipped or unhealthy? 28% of the French women think unhealthy, 68% of the American women. This is diagnostic of a general thing we find. French people tend to think of food as something you eat. It's in your mouth. Here's what it tastes like. We think of it in our arteries. We think of it as, it's like, what's it going to do to us? I mean, it tastes great. Okay. Ironically, if we say, do you eat a healthy diet, 76% of the French women say yes, only 28% of the American women. They're eating higher fat food. They don't eat low fat yogurt. They don't drink skim milk. And they are as healthy as we are, and they're not worried. So we got something to learn. Okay. Here's another one. We asked people, food and medicine are fundamentally different. We asked that question. 74% of the French women strongly agree with that statement. Only 16% of the Americans. We have fudged the difference between food and medicine. You go to CVS, you can get all the foods you want. You can go to Walmart and get anything you want, right? Whereas the French drugstore sells drugs. And a food store sells food. But we have made it, foods are drugs. You know, foods make you change your mood. They do this. They make your arteries. So we have sort of destroyed a natural category which would be important. Okay, I'll skip that one. Now let's just turn to the food environment briefly. French don't sell much low-fat food. I happen to like fat. I think it's okay to eat fat for health. And I like full-fat yogurt. You know how long it takes me at my local supermarket to find any? My local supermarket has 150 different kinds of yogurt, of which about 4 or 5 are full fat, somewhere buried in the shelves. Okay. This is done with 2 Penn undergraduates, Erin, Pete, and there was one of the two. And we went to McDonald's. We went to restaurants in Paris and Philadelphia and ordered the same thing and waited. We just waited. Look at that. The average McDonald's, the same 7 dishes, weighed 189 grams in France and 256 in the United States. Now, when you go into McDonald's and eat a meal, you eat what they give you and you walk out, right? I mean, that's what you do. You finish the meal. Quick and Burger King, those are equivalent. Look at that. Even in Chinese restaurants in France, you order the same 6 dishes and you get a different amount of food. The basic issue is when you are hungry and there's good food, you eat it. How much do you eat? As much as is put in front of you, roughly speaking, usually. And if you put more in, but we'll eat it because it's good. All right? I was very proud of myself this morning. I happened to be taking a Japanese friend out for breakfast, and I went to a place called Nifty 50s. It's a wonderful little diner near the airport. And they had a 3-egg omelet. And I said, I want a 1-egg omelet. And they said, we don't do that. I said, look, because I knew I would eat a 3-egg omelet. I said, give me a 1-egg omelet, I'll pay for a 3-egg omelet. They said, okay. I ate my 1-egg omelet. I was quite happy. I don't think I would have known if I'd eaten a 3-1 that I was more happy, but okay. Supermarket portions. We went into Carrefour, major French supermarket, Acme here. We looked at what's the most common size of individual food. For yogurt, it's 125 grams. In Carrefour, 227. When you get one of those little things of yogurt, you finish it. The French got less to eat. Even their fruit is small. Their apricots are smaller. Their apples are smaller. We weighed all these things. Their Coca-Cola can is smaller. You don't have 2 Cokes. You have 8 Coke. Whatever it is, you do it. Okay. Now, there's the yogurts. Compare them. You might say this is because of the metric system or something like that. So we went through the French stores and we measured everything else. We measured toothpaste size, toilet paper size, cat food size. French other things are not smaller. Their paintbrushes aren't smaller, their napkins aren't smaller. And in fact, their toilet paper square is bigger even though they eat less. Okay. The big thing we're focusing on in portion size. Americans put a lot of food in front of each other because that means I love you in the United States. Look at the big pile of food I just did. Thanksgiving, our big day. It's a success and people say, I ate so much I can't get up. What a success! Right? So the French sort of think that good food is what the gift is, not a lot of it. And they would rather have a couple of really small, delicious pieces of chocolate than a bigger pile of not as good chocolate. Why don't we go like that? So Andrew Geyer and I did some studies in which we left in the lobby of an apartment house downtown, which always has food out for the people in the lobby, just a big bowl. They agreed to help us do our research, so we put a big bowl of M&Ms out. The people are used to this. Some days we put a big spoon, and other days we put a small spoon in. You can take as many spoons as you want. Guess what? People took a lot less when we had a small spoon. They could have taken, it was 1/4, they could have had 4 spoons. But they didn't. They had pretzels out. These big Philadelphia pretzels? We cut them in half. They're naturally bent in half. People eat a lot less pretzels. Basically, people eat 1 of something usually. 1 yogurt, 1 apple, and that's sort of a rule. There are exceptions like eggs, but generally we have a 1 rule. You eat 1 of 1 sandwich. So if you make it a little smaller, nobody cares, and they're happy. So that's what the French have done. They've made their portion size smaller. This just shows what's happened to Cokes, size of Coke since in the 20th century. This is the smallest Coke. It's still there a little bigger, but look at those other 3 sizes. It used to be, those of you old enough know, there used to be 1 6-ounce Coke. That was all there was. And the trouble with this one is it's much cheaper per ounce of Coke. So you feel, I get the little one, I'm really wasting money. The way to get around that, by the way, is to take a big one and get a glass and share it with another person so you can feel like you're getting good money. Another thing you can do, by the way, as a practical strategy here is order 2 appetizers or even 3 instead of an appetizer and a main course. I mean, we do serve small portion sizes. We call them appetizers. The French could call that a main course. Okay? So finally, we're now doing work in cafeterias, and we have shown, this is a cafeteria on campus, not a student cafeteria. It's got a 3-deep salad bar. So the stuff in the middle, you have to reach over to get, okay, like this. We find if we put food there, people eat less of it. Just because they have to reach over to get it. It's not a lot. They don't eat a lot less. But you don't have to eat a lot less. Remember, an apple a day. We can get them to eat less egg by putting it in the middle. You know, a few percent less, but that's all you need. Okay. So we've been doing a whole bunch of things. We've also found that if you use spoons in the food as opposed to tongs, people eat more because it's easier to take food out with big spoon. If we put a big spoon in there, they can take more out, so they do. All right. Now we've recently shown that if we take one of those potato chip things, and every 7th chip, we make a different color. We use a different chip from the same company, but it's got a red color. It's tomato. We can cut people's intake very substantially. And what we're doing is simply they're just going like this, and they get a red one, they say, oh, and that's what we want. We just want to stop them from this. Right? That works. Okay. So the big problem, I just want to close with energy expenditure. There's the other half, right? You can lose weight by eating less, and you can lose weight by spending more energy. It's actually harder to spend more energy than it is to eat less. But you can do it. This is physics, right? Everyone knows that. Energy intake either is expended or it's stored into your weight. You can do it this way, but it comes out the same. You can make this figure any way you want. This is physics. You can't get around it. The French do a number of things to make you spend more energy. One of them is that I lived in Dijon for a while and did some of the work. We had a 4th floor walk-up apartment, very common. That's a lot of exercise. You want to go take a car to go to the market, 6 blocks away, okay? You go out, every car has its own little garage, very common. If you're going by yourself, you have to open the door, get in the car, pull it out, get out of the car, close the door. Then you get to the opening gate. There's not an automatic opener. You get out, you open the door, you pull the car out, you park it, you go and close the door. And you know what? You don't do it. I mean, you don't do it to go 5 blocks. It's just not worth it. And besides that, gas costs $5 a gallon. So and furthermore, there's a butcher and there's a grocery and a bakery 2 blocks away. Now, this is sort of like Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan for a year, 10 years ago, and I found I was walking much more. I didn't have a car. But the problem is that suburban life, that's where we're all congregating. The suburbs, you're too far to walk anywhere, and your car is parked right next to your kitchen in the garage. So your foraging consists of going to the supermarket once a week, getting your stuff, driving home, and carrying it from your garage to your refrigerator. That's your week of exercise. Now, just one final thought. This is a silly one, but it's not completely silly. French love dogs more than we do. I'm a big dog lover. Their dogs, like our dogs, make poop. But French have not internalized the idea that you have to pick up your dog's poop. So French streets are covered with dog poop. Now, this is not nice, but if you were in the United States, this is a French town, if you were in the United States, you'd walk up the block here, but in France, you're dodging the dog. You actually spend more energy walking down a French street because it's like an obstacle course. Now it's silly, but you do it on every street, every day. It's going to add up. It's the little things that add up. Okay. Now the French are now trying to get people to stop doing this, but actually they're actually going to affect their waistline. Okay. So the last thing I want to say, these are my family dogs walking in the park. I just took this picture at random. They tend to stay on the path. Not entirely. They can walk through the woods, but they tend to be on the path. That's what we've done. We've created a path through life which involves sitting on your rear end, controlling your video with remote control, and having food come to you in large quantities. That is really great. I mean, you don't have to do anything, but it's not good for your waistline. It's much better to have to get up and do something. It's much better to not have a remote, for example. Little things like that. Okay, so I'm going to skip this because we don't have time. Let me say, here's what we might learn from the French. Make portions smaller. That's the biggest one. If we could reduce American portion size as sold in restaurants and in stores by 1%, nobody would notice it, and it would solve the obesity problem. It's not that easy to make that happen, because if one company does it, the other company will immediately say, hey, you're getting cheated by those guys. So this is a case where a monopoly would be a good idea. The collusion among the food. They make more money. They can keep their prices the same and just make their portions a little smaller. That's the single biggest thing. Secondly, French spend more time eating than we do, much more. And it's a social event. When we ask French, tell us about dinner last night, they are much more likely than Americans to mention who they ate with. We think dinner last night means, oh, I had a hamburger and this and that. We don't bother to tell us. You know, it's more of a social event. Okay. So, French focus on freshness and taste in food. We focus on shelf life. The big thing is you get the tomato in the store and it's going to stay okay for 2 weeks. They don't expect it to stay. They go shopping every day. They don't expect it to stay. When you get a piece of fruit in France, you better eat it within a day or two because it's going to go rotten. But you can always go out tomorrow and get some more. French don't snack. Now, it's considered almost impolite here to not offer people something to eat when they stop by. You know, that's really not necessary. If you offer it, people will eat it. And finally, the actual foods that consumed are different. I won't get to that, including wine, which probably is healthy at the level that they eat it. And the French eat more variety, actually, of vegetables and stuff than we do. And finally, of course, they are more oriented toward walking and bicycle riding to get to places, and we are the car culture. So going up one level, and this is I'm about to close, those of you who are wondering about when you're going to get on to your next activity, which I hope involves walking, by the way. Though they can't bring a bus right up to the door here. In general, French seem to be more moderation-oriented, and we are abundance-oriented. This is a big thing about Americans. We have a lot. It's really nice. I mean, we have an abundance of everything, but it became part of our myth, our sort of like the big plate of food, the big everything, the big car, too, by the way. Secondly, we focus more on quantity. They focus more on quality. I'm suggesting that these would all be good things for us to pick up. Thirdly, they have many more collective food values. This isn't really related to weight, but the French have an idea of what good food is. When you go to your local diner and order a steak, they'll say to you, you want French fries, you can have mashed potatoes, you can have home fried potatoes, right? You can have baked potatoes, you can even have potato salad, and you're making them. The French would never ask you that. Steak goes with French fries. There's not even a question. French restaurants have relatively few choices because you say, I'm going here, I hear the chef is good, let the chef tell me what to eat. I don't have to add salt, pepper, mustard, little vinegar. Americans sort of making the food at the table to make it right for them. What's the chance that they're better than the chef? Okay. And most important, French, this is something very deep. It was pointed out by T. Boskotowski, an economist some time ago. Europeans in general spend more money on making their lives interesting, and Americans spend more money on making their lives comfortable. We get the nice mattresses, the automatic windows in the cars and all that, the food processes. They go to the concert, they go out for a meal. Americans are amazed when they go to Europe, say in France, that the dinner will cost them more than the hotel. I mean, that's the French say, well, the dinner is an occasion and the hotel is just a bed. Now, what's interesting about it, we talked about adaptation. You adapt very quickly to what we call comforts. If I say that you have a good year last year, you're not going to say, oh, I got this mattress. It was just incredible. And my air conditioning in the house, it was zooming along. And you should see that ice maker in my refrigerator. That's not what you say. You say, we had a great trip to Italy, and my old friend Sylvia came. I haven't seen her in years. Those are the kinds of things you remember. Those are where the Europeans are spending their money, and we're spending it just trying to make it a little easier to navigate through life. So I will close with the idea that we should focus on our environment. Dieting doesn't work, sadly. We should try to fix our environment, which is fairly easy to do. We should not curtail the pleasure of eating. That's not the way to make people happier or to get them to lose weight. They should enjoy their little piece of chocolate. Let it melt slowly in your mouth. The best thing about chocolate is that it melts at body temperature. If you eat it fast, you won't find that out. Make little changes, changes that you won't even notice, that add up day after day. It's not dramatic. You're not going to lose 10 pounds in a week or anything, but it's going to have its effect in the long run. That all these changes accumulate, and it is true that eating can be bad for health, but not eating is much worse.
We'd all like to thank Dr. Rozin very much. We will not give him our TCPW M&Ms as his gift, although maybe we will. But
I like M&Ms.
Okay, we will. Terry, can we have a few of the extra M&M packs if you don't mind?
I'll only eat one of them. One
Okay.
pack. No,
Oh, you see, I said a few.
All to be a portion. But a bag of M&Ms, that's okay.
Okay, great. Dr. Rozin, thank you
Yeah,
so
sure,
much for joining us. We've all learned a lot. We will go home to our creature comforts, I'm afraid.
Yes.
But thank you very much for your expertise, your years of devotion and dedication to Penn. It means a lot to all of us. Thank you for joining us today.
I have 3 children who are Penn alumni, by the way.